Hello, this is Dan Shea with Veterans for Peace Forum, and I have a couple of things that we're going to do today. We're going to have a couple of interesting guests from the Returning Veterans Project, and I have Trudy Cooper here with me to talk about an event that's coming up. But first I wanted to talk about a little event that we did yesterday. As you know, that the all of a sudden, as we had brought back, we were bringing people back from Iraq. The war was supposed to be over, and all of a sudden there's a crisis in Iraq. There's a group they call ISIS who's supposedly mixed up with affiliates of Al-Qaeda or not Al-Qaeda. We keep hearing various things, and but the main thing is that it is in the area of the Sunni land bases. And if we go back, I hear just a while ago I was reading a little story on article on World War I, and when they really carved out Iraq after that war. And before, what we're talking about right now is that it's probably going back to the same sort of configurations as it was through its various ethnic identities that it was in the past. And why are we intervening? So there's been a real drum from the chicken hawks to go back to war, and we have over 4,000 veterans that have been killed in those wars, over 11 years of war already. I think the people here are tired of war. Veterans for Peace on a national level just called a press conference in which they were asking, Iraq veterans warn Obama military intervention will be a disaster. They had a number of people speaking. Ross Caputi and Matt Southworth of Iraq Veterans Against the War spoke. That was on Thursday, June 19th. Tim Kalar, a father of two, tour Iraq veteran with PTSD, also spoke. Ray McGovern, a former CIA intelligence analyst, spoke. And when we put all of these people together and their expertise and how they feel about what has been happening in the war, today's Iraq veterans and family members are calling on the Obama administration to stay out of the brewing civil war, to provide humanitarian aid to the refugees, to pursue international diplomacy towards reconciliation for the people of Iraq. Now, for me, here locally we've been doing a number of different events, and we didn't react to this quickly enough to put on our own event. So if we, this was being done in Washington, D.C. at a press conference, and we need our chapters all across the country to take some sort of action to say that we are opposed to this war. So I gathered some people around us, and we had people from military families, 9/11 Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. We had Physicians for Social Responsibility. We had Peace and Justice Works there. And of course, a number of our Vietnam veterans and some from our veterans. Chapter 72 here spans from World War II to the present war. So we have, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and many wars in between, plus Iraq and Afghanistan. And all of our vets, the minute this happened, your post-traumatic stress just goes through the ceiling. And so for me, I was a pissed off vet, and I wrote a little piece that I had sent to the newspapers, trying to keep it very brief. What does war mean? What does it mean if we go back to war? It says, more war is not an answer to the rebellion in Iraq. More war means more innocent men, women, and children killed. More refugees, more torture, more Gitmo. More war, more dead soldiers, more wounded, filling overcrowded, non-existing VA beds. More veteran suicides, more homeless veterans, more domestic violence, more alcohol and drug abuse, more widows and widowers. More war means more desertions, more soldiers going AWOL, more will rebel and go to jail. Our Department of Veterans Affairs has been in a crisis. It's had it on its hands of being underfunded, And it's created a number of scandals of veterans not being taken care of. They've neglected their claims, their health care, and attempts to cover it up. Our message is clear, you know. We are tired of the war beating drums. They will only multiply the problem. And our message is clear: no more war, no more dead and wounded. Care for the veterans you've neglected. Now that's just, when you start to think about what is happening in our country, we have to also, I had an email from a friend, and I read this at the demonstration and this press conference we had yesterday, Friday at 11 o'clock in front of the federal building. This was from one of a veteran that was on my Facebook. His name is Shay Brown. He says, almost after almost one half of everything that we export is military related. In 2008, our total exports were $1.441 trillion, and $696 billion of that was military related items or services. This is what we do. And now it is so bad that they can actually create scenarios that create demand for these weapons. It cannot continue like this much longer. Folks are slowly getting wise to the play, and when the truths come out about it, we will slowly regain control of our government. I hope, and he points to a little fact sheet you can go to, exposefacts.org, is the new whistleblower, the support outfit that will be encouraging more federal whistleblowers to kind of reveal the shenanigans of war, the cost of war, and so that is just a brief thing. And you know, I think veterans need to come out. That was a way in which we could express ourselves here in Portland. But we have to really think about the veterans that are coming back with post-traumatic stress. There are 22 suicides a day from the wars that we already have. Over 650 claims for post-traumatic stress and BTI. You have veterans that haven't even applied for benefits because they may still be in the military. Actually, they're not veterans, they're service people who need care but don't want to be stigmatized by requesting help. They want to continue their career in the military. There are military families that don't get treatment from the Veterans Administration. So that's another thing. Now, there's a lot of controversy about what's going on in the world about drones too, and that's why I've asked Trudy to come here and speak to us. Trudy Cooper, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you.
There are different ways of looking at technology. You know, we talk about technology in war. Of course, I'm opposed to anything that is going to advance death and destruction of other people's lands and people. But there are pros and cons to technology. There are good things about technology. We can communicate with each other. We can learn from each other. We can share knowledge. So we're talking about doing a program. You want to tell them a little bit about, this is Oregonians for Drone Control?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, about the organization, it was started about a year ago, and the focus of the organization is on domestic drones, as opposed to, you know, another area that I work in with Code Pink nationally is obviously the drones that are being used in war. But this is regarding what kind of legislation should exist in Oregon to address the significant issues with safety and with privacy and with First Amendment rights, civil rights.
Right. So, like, what would be some of the scenarios that we'd be looking at? I know that I was at last meeting. I was with you there because it's a coalition of people.
Mm-hmm.
We have Veterans for Peace, which would be a supporter. What are the other organizations that are involved?
Well, you mean ongoing or sponsoring the event?
Well, ongoing.
Yeah, ongoing. I think they're similar to the ones that are sponsoring the event. So Alliance for Democracy, Oregon Progressive Party, the Economic Justice Action Group of the First Unitarian Church of Portland, Pacific Green Party, Physicians for Social Responsibility, and Veterans for Peace, Chapter
Yes.
72.
And one of the things that we were talking about at the meeting was the sort of pro and con about the good and evil of technology, and that Abram, is that his name?
Aram.
Aram. I wasn't sure how you pronounced it. Aram is an expert. He's an engineer who actually works on this kind of technology, and he was showing me a lot of stuff about how it was used in agriculture, or how it can screen land and see problems in the geography. We can detect weather. There are various things in which
Fight wildfires.
Fight wildfires. So we're talking about doing a panel. What's the date for this program?
It's August 7th, which is a Thursday, and it will start at 6:30. It will be at the First Unitarian Church of Portland in the Eliot Chapel.
And do we know all the panelists yet right now?
Well, we know all but one panelist. So we have Colonel Ann Wright, who will be speaking about the international, actually I put a little title on each one of these that might be of interest. So Colonel Ann Wright is talking about Brave New War, U.S. policy, drone strikes, and international law. So that will be the wider context of, the first that we've learned about drones, and the word drone, the association is the military application,
Right.
is the association with weaponized drones. So the industry has pushed very hard to call them instead unmanned aerial vehicles or UAV systems. I don't think that necessarily is going to change anything, but that's the effort to make the distinction, that you're asking, the question you're really asking
Right.
about is, what are the positives and negatives of drone technology, and how can we humans and society catch up with this technology and use it for the public good? Because in any situation where there's a vacuum of policy, there's the high potential for abuse.
That's right.
Or even inadvertent misuse. So that's what the concern is about, and that's why the organization formed. And I think, with the event, we're trying to do something that is a little bit ambitious, because usually, and we've talked about this before, that we have our own community of people that support each other in
Right.
this kind of perspective, and we often don't go beyond, as we put it, the choir, to or it's difficult to, it's difficult
Right.
to attract a really diverse audience. So we're really trying to reach out also to the industry and see if we can get participation from the industry, ask them to talk about what applications they see, what are their perspectives on what Colonel Ann Wright will have to say. So one of the people on the panel is Brian Whiteside, who is an industry representative and is active with the Industry Professional Association, which is nationwide or possibly international. And then the third presenter that we have is Peter Lumsdain, and we're calling that Robo Sapiens, Robotics and Our Human Future. And so what he's really going to be talking about, as far as I can understand from reading his materials and looking at some of his earlier presentations, is what is this whole robotic age? And is it, in some ways, it's more astounding than the other technological thresholds or watersheds that we've had, that it's more to catch up with.
Right.
And it has overwhelmed us faster than technologies of the past. I think that's what the perspective he's going to give. And one of the things that he has said is that by the time you regulate what you think is the technology, it's already moved way far ahead
that's
to
right.
what you don't even recognize yet.
Well, I wanted to say too that, since we have this sort of coalition of people working on the Oregonians for drone control for August 7th, we also, VFP is also actively involved on an annual basis with the Hiroshima and Nagasaki events that take place every year. And this year it will be on August 6th. At Wednesday, August 6th at 6 to 7 p.m. at Japanese American Historical Plaza. That's on the waterfront there, just at NATO and Parkway in Cooch. This is being sponsored by a number of groups many that are sponsoring ours, but the the website to go to is going to be OregonPSR.org. That's www.OregonPSR.org, and that stands for Physicians for Social Responsibility. So we want you to check into both of these events. Ann will be speaking at both of these events, and Colonel Ann Wright is also a member of Veterans for Peace and Code Pink, and a number of critical organizations for peace. And she is a major keynote speaker, and you should come out and hear her. Now, I want to thank you for coming in and telling us about this, and we're going to move on and go bring in our next guest. So thank you, and
Thank you.
Trudy, thank you for coming in.
Lord. What's going on?
You look at the leadership, or you look at the institutions, or the things that are held up in these esteems, none of these things seem to have any spiritual relationship to life.
Yeah. At times the situation's heavy on my heart, still I rise. Articulate my vision while you feel the vibe. In this manipulation game, it seems I'm ill-advised from killing lies, and finally realize it's real lives that bleed. But do we feel they cries? Our dreams televised, sell us lies, and kill what's real inside. Debris, systematic soldiers spraying rounds with no precision. Motivation, motivation, globalism, no religion. It seems unspoken, television, culture, vision. Protecting broken dreams like codes in prison. Selecting vote elections, but won't connect the dots, self-deception. Like followers of pro wrestle plots. Complain you best stop when this game of chess lot. They think they're next to God, police stay check the blocks. Investors stock dollars drop, then commence the cops. Real revolutionaries know the struggle never stop, never stop. Real revolutionaries know
The way that the
struggle never
cancers of
stop.
greed and war, the way that these viruses, these diseases have spread, and no one is really taking responsibility
What's going on? What's going on? What's going on?
to effectively deal with these things.
We're the real revolutionaries, real guys. Hypnotized by the shadow playing in front of your eyes. The systematic programming, one with the hive. Energy, predatorial abduction of minds. This seduction in the matrix, put trust in the lies of these elitists. Mass manipulators lead the people. I see the codes like Neo, hungry ghosts feed the ego and live lost. Forget to realize what the real is. Rick Ross used to be a prison guard, and he still is. Until the killers and the $100 billers who ain't got no feelings. We recognize what the deal is. You swallowing that blue pill and following Masons, feeding in to the new form of colonization. For some bread and a place up in the matrix. Think you got it all figured out, cause there nothing is safe. I don't respect you cause I don't respect the system. I got visions of freedom cause I won't accept the prison. Visions, freedom cause I won't
So whatever
accept
this
the
disease
prison.
of aggression and violence and greed and all, whatever this disease mentality is that lives in this life system now, it's eating up the spirit of the diseased. When we leave as humans, we go back to being human being. That really means something. But we live in a reality now, or in a time where I would say to anyone, protect your spirit. Protect your spirit, because you're in the place where spirits get eaten.
I like Casey. Casey was the name of my son. He passed away a number of years ago. One of my favorite names. And you are a OEF vet, Operation Enduring Freedom, and now the representative, the outreach coordinator for Returning Veterans Project.
Yes.
And so
Just hired.
just
Yes,
hired.
just
Okay.
started.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, first of all, I don't know if you got to hear a little bit of the program. That
No,
we
the
talked
sound
about.
wasn't on out
Okay.
there, so.
Well, we talked about a number of things that are happening with war. We had a demonstration here yesterday about people going back to Iraq.
Right.
I know when in 1991, when the first, Bush's father, Bush 1, went to war on Iraq, that my post-traumatic stress went to the roof. And each time there has been an incident, it is constantly having to deal with this stuff. And I'd never applied for anything with the VA or even thought I had post-traumatic stress. I
Right.
was in denial for many years.
Yeah.
Always getting into trouble for one thing or another.
Really?
But I just couldn't figure out what
Imagine
it was. Couldn't figure out what it
Kinda
was.
got in the way a
what it
little bit.
was, yeah. And then I started hanging around with more veterans. I think that's the first time I wrote something. I was back in college, and I had been a labor organizer and been a human rights activist, but I'd
Yeah.
never spoken as a vet.
Right.
And I had also, when this happened, I wrote something about my experience in Vietnam and why this bothered me,
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there was people just walking up to me and saying, I read your piece and I want to let you know I'm a Vietnam veteran. One was a Vietnamese refugee, and he was asking me, well, why did you do this,
Yeah.
And it, and then it made me start thinking about all these things that I had, and it just became, I started being around Veterans for Peace, people that were doing things. We just crossed paths because I was working on other projects,
Right.
and we come together. And somebody says, Dan, you got that 1,000-mile stare, I said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. In fact, at college, I went in for I was having trouble doing my tests and stuff, and
Couldn't concentrate, right? Yeah.
I couldn't concentrate, but I'm also dyslexic, So I was being tested for that, and then one of the counselors said, "We think you're having mini-mole seizures." I said, "What?" She says, "Yeah, you'll be spaced off in
Disassociation,
for a long period of time."
Yeah.
I said, well, I didn't know. I had no idea. I thought I was just thinking through the problem,
Right.
But my mind would travel
Just
in different.
go away,
yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the first time I really started even thinking that I had a problem, and then people were saying you need to go somewhere and get help, and then I started going to the VA, and
Good.
it began a process for me,
Yeah.
And I ran across other people that were doing workshops, and then of course. Learning about the Returning Veterans Project
Yeah,
when it came
yeah.
about. And it just seemed like so important. One of the things that happens is, well, and so I should ask you about why do veterans and families come to you rather than just go to the VA?
The problem now is that we are almost totally full. We have 152 practitioners across the state, and we're almost full.
Well, I think of it, I guess when I think of it, I didn't even think about it as the entire state. I was thinking Portland,
Right.
That's where my head is, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that it was
Yeah.
in various areas
Throughout
state.
the Willamette Valley, throughout the Portland metro area, we have about 5 therapists in Vancouver now, 4 or 5. Then down the I-5 corridor, Corvallis, Eugene, Monmouth, down to Ashland, Grants Pass, and Medford, and then also in Bend and Redmond.
Well, we might be getting a little ahead of ourselves. Maybe we should go back and tell people what the Returning Veterans Project is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how that works for people.
Okay, so the project is a nonprofit that was created in 2005 by a local therapist named Carol Levine.
Oh, I know Carol.
Yeah, who's now retired. She was watching the news in 2004. She's in her 70s and can remember people coming home from Vietnam, as I can. Not in my 70s yet, but I can still remember. And was seeing what was happening, and says that she was able to put herself in the mindset of having been in a war zone and then what it might be like to come home right after, and how challenging that would be. And she thought she wanted to do something. What can I do? All I know how to do is therapy. And her friends all said, Do it. And so in 2 days, she gathered 25 local therapists, and they put the organization together. And what we do is provide free, confidential counseling, as well as massage, acupuncture, chiropractic, and naturopathic care for Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans that don't have to be in combat, but just somewhere in Iraq or Afghanistan, and their family members, their spouses, intimate partners, children, parents, sometimes siblings or grandparents who've also been impacted by their service. So we have 152 practitioners. Last year they delivered 3,800 hours of free services worth $450,000 to 394 vets and 160 family members. So they're amazing. We couldn't do this without those folks that give up one slot in their practice.
And do you deal with people that are homeless and have
Yeah.
and is there do you have services that help them, or do you referral?
We do a lot of information, resource referral. We get calls from all over the country, actually, around those issues. And then my providers in the last 6 months, I think I've gotten calls from a handful of providers who are serving couch surfing or already homeless current war vets.
Right.
And they need mental health services. They're already homeless. Some are at risk of incarceration. So I think we're seeing people who have been home quite a while and are coming into services for the first time, and things have fallen apart already. And maybe they aren't eligible for VA services anymore because it's been 5 years and they never enrolled. And
Is there a limitation?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's talk
Yeah.
about that.
And if, excuse me, and if you are a Guard or Reserve, you have to have been in combat in order to be eligible, and service connected in order to be eligible. You have 1 year after coming out of combat to get enrolled into the VA system, and then 5 years after you leave the military to re-enroll in the VA system.
Is that new? I don't even remember that even being a problem when I was
Well,
a Vietnam veteran.
I couldn't really honestly tell you. I don't know. I enrolled as soon as I got back because I got injured while I was over there several times. So I enrolled immediately upon coming back before I got out of the military. But I do know that I believe they're starting to open that up because
you can appeal it, I think.
you can appeal it, you can get a waiver, but the job that I am finishing up with now, I have most of my clients are Desert Storm or Vietnam era veterans, and there are several of them that have never enrolled in the system, but we were able to get them in so that they could get some type of care. So it's kind of complex, but there is a time limit as far as when you can enroll once you leave the military. And then if you're service connected, and if it can be proven that you're service connected, then that changes. But yeah, there is a time
window.
limit.
Yeah.
And we found, excuse me, that for a lot of the current war veterans, they do not seek services upon immediately returning unless they were injured. They do wait. And that's the unfortunate thing, because they're finding that at the 4, 5, and 6 year is now when they're going, oh my God, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And at that point, there's a good possibility they would not be eligible for VA healthcare services.
Yeah, well, it's almost 30 years for me. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just
Right,
when you think
right.
about it, thank God I can get in still.
Yeah.
Right.
But,
Right. The people I know that work at the VA have told me that they just saw a rush of people when these wars started
Yeah.
from Vietnam era,
Yeah.
because like you, they just were fine, and then, or, we're making it through, and then flashbacks and lots
Yeah.
of different things started happening for them.
Or I just never connected it. I know that.
Right,
I know
right.
that too. That I was very angry with the bureaucracy of the military. I did go when I first came back once to them, and the bureaucracy was just appalling to me, and I felt I was treated very badly, and I was angry, and I didn't want to have anything to do. So anytime I'd even have to deal with paperwork, just psychologically,
Yeah.
I cannot put my hand on the paper.
Yeah, I
And
think that's true for a lot of people.
To file for it, I actually had to go to a VSO officer to help me, and they fill out everything for me as I talk to them, because I cannot do it. I will not look at it.
Yeah.
I don't, and I can sign it, and that's about it.
Well, we should talk about them. They are of a big help. Almost every
Yeah.
county in Oregon has a VSO, a Veteran Service Officer, and they're great people to go to. It's
Yeah.
their job to help you get benefits.
That's right.
Well, what's
Yeah.
really nice about the VSOs is I believe they're all veterans. I believe you have to be a veteran in
I
order to
think
be a
that's
VSO.
true.
So, you know, some of them have been there, some of them haven't, but they still have that. They know that military language.
That's
they know
right.
there's that way of talking with somebody versus a non-veteran talking to a veteran
That's
when
right.
it comes to issues that they're having. So, yes, the VSOs are absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
The VSO that I used was fabulous. And he's been doing it for many, many years. And he
Yeah.
was a Navy vet.
Yeah, there were a number of veterans from foreign wars that are certified for
Right,
that.
they do that too.
VSWs,
Yeah.
American Legion,
Yeah,
Disabled
absolutely.
American Veterans.
From Multnomah County. So you have various people that are out there, and
Yeah.
and so you refer people to them too.
We do. We give our providers a packet of information that
Oh, good.
includes that information that they can copy and give to the vet that they serve. We also have everything up on our website at returningveterans.org on our links and resources pages.
That's so. You want to repeat that again?
Returningveterans.org.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
You need to find out information. That's the first place to check.
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Casey, tell us a little bit about your time in the service and when did you join and.
Well, I went in February 1981. Went into the Oregon Army National Guard. I am a dependent of two veterans. My mom was a Navy vet. My dad was a World War II vet. Went in because I had kind of gotten in some trouble and wanted to stay out of trouble. Really wasn't sure if I wanted to like it or not, and ended up loving it. And I made a career out of it. And I retired in 2007. Did multiple jobs went in as a combat medic and came out as an ammunition specialist.
What's an ammunition specialist?
We issue and receive all the ammunition to the troops. So if you need bullets, you need ammunition for your weapons, you come see me. So, and I did that for the last 12 years I was in, and that was my love. I really liked doing that.
And then you were injured in the service?
I got my first injury was in 1991. We were doing sling load trading up at Fort Lewis, and I blew out my knee. And then was injured in Afghanistan going out the back of a truck. I hurt my back and my neck, and then I hurt my shoulder weightlifting. So, yeah. And then we came home. We went. We were the first large deployment out of the state of Oregon, and we took a little over 1,000. We took 1,200 troops with us to Afghanistan, and our mission was to train the Afghan National Army, do humanitarian and medical missions.
And what kind of humanitarian?
Oh, we did.
This is cool.
Yeah, the humanitarian missions we did were awesome. We took connexes and connexes of clothes, and then clothes were being sent to us all the time, clothes and shoes and book supplies. And we brought one 40-foot connex that was full of nothing but school supplies for the kids. And so we would go into the local villages. We were stationed at Camp Phoenix out of Kabul, Afghanistan. And we would go into the villages around, and we would hand out clothes and coats in the wintertime and shoes. And then when school was getting ready to start, we did a big school drive. We handed out backpacks full of school supplies, books. We helped rebuild several hospitals and several schools. We went into some of the really far out villages and helped drill water. So these people had fresh water for the first time.
Heart surgery. Talk about that. That was cool.
The medics and some of the doctors that we worked with got a group of, they worked with another organization here in Oregon, and I'm really sorry, I don't remember the name
Mercy
of that
Corps?
organ. No, I don't think it was Mercy Corps. They got 25 doctors to volunteer their time to come over and spend 30 days. And they were there to do nothing but do heart surgeries and heart care on children.
Wow.
And so when we were doing the medical missions, we would look for children who That was one of the things we'd watch for as we were treating them, was to watch for any children that had heart conditions. And then they would go to what was called the Cure Hospital there in Kabul, which is the big major hospital there. And they came in, I think it was sometime around April or May of 2007, and performed multiple surgeries on young kids that had heart conditions, and that was really cool to help screen the kids for that. And then we were allowed to adopt people. Like when we'd go out on medical missions, and if we saw a kid or adult or something that we thought needed some extra care, we were allowed to adopt. And I had the honor and the pleasure of adopting a young woman and her brother who, in the first invasion, when we first went to Afghanistan, were caught in one of the bombings, and they both had over 60% third-degree burns throughout their body.
What year was that?
2001.
2001.
And her brother was at that point unable to work because the country is so poor that they really don't have proper medical care there. Well, the scar tissue from his burns were starting to atrophy, and they were pulling his arms up and pulling his feet up where he couldn't hardly walk. And the young lady, her biggest issue is that her chest was burnt, and she lost a lot of her breasts. And so I put in my application to adopt them, and actually got them in, so they got surgeries done on their scars so that their feet and their arms would have movements, and we got her breasts redone, and got prosthetics
Cool.
for her.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I haven't heard these kinds of stories.
I know, I hadn't either, which I think is
which
really
is
cool.
which is important, that, and this is one of the things that I mean, there's a sadness to the idea that we go to a country and bomb and kill, and at the same time, when we could be doing more of this kind of work, which I know that in the whole concept of the idea of winning the hearts and minds, these are the kinds of things that wins the hearts and minds of people. And if we were going with those kinds of missions, I think would be so much better, for all of us and for our post-traumatic stress.
Right.
Yeah, I was really fortunate to be able to be a part of those medical missions and those humanitarian missions. I made it a goal. I wanted to learn as much as I could about the country and the people that was there. If I'm living in a foreign country, I need to know about them. And I had an interpreter assigned to me who was absolutely fabulous, and we still communicate today. And he took the time to really teach me a lot about a lot of the old ways and how things have changed since the Taliban, and taught me a lot about his family. And so I was really fortunate in that way that I got to really be a part of that, because a lot of our soldiers did not. If they were out in outlying FOBs, we had several FOBs, especially the ones that were close to Pakistan, that were constantly being mortared. And
explain FOBs.
Forward operating base.
There you go.
So they're bases that are, you have your big major bases.
Right.
Kandahar was a big major base. Bagram Air Force Base was a big one. Kandahar is ran by Foreign Coalition. Bagram was ran by the Air Force, the United States Air Force. Kia was a multi-force, Kia was at the Kabul International Airport. And we were at Camp Phoenix, and it was a U.S. ran post, but we had anywhere from 5 to 7 different coalitions on that post. And then we had smaller, what they call FOBs, forward outward bases, that were spread out all over Afghanistan. And we had one that was very close to Pakistan, and they were constantly being mortared. And when they would have to come to Phoenix for supplies, they would, almost every time they convoyed, were hit with IEDs, or they would get into gunfights. And so they didn't get to see a lot of the other stuff that is outside of just the direct combat.
Right.
So I was very fortunate that way. Not to say I didn't see my fair share of bad stuff,
Right.
but I think that was one of the things that helped me. I got to know the people, and I got to talk with them. And that was quite incredible. And I've been invited back when the war is over, which I don't know.
Let's hope.
Let's hope that happens.
It's funny that there's a number of Veterans for Peace and Iraq veterans have done work together to do like a water project in Iraq. There are a number of veterans that are Iraq veterans. When this new sort of beating the drums for war popped up, who have been maintained contacts with the Iraqi people. They have
Right.
friends there, and they've been trying to figure different things that they could go back and help people. And that's something I know. When I was Vietnam, I wasn't there long enough, but I didn't know the people. I didn't know the language. I didn't know the history. I didn't know anything. And then I was sent to the Philippines, and again, it was one of these things. I was in a Marine Corps base in which we were guarding out in the middle of the jungle ammunition dumps, basically, and you'd have 4 days on, 3 days off, that kind of thing, and just constantly going into a town, which was considered at the time a whore town. And the veterans would just use the women there for sex and alcohol and drugs and everything else. And I began to think, and this history of the Philippines. These are the people that fought with us in World War II. And I talked to a Filipino soldier who would tell me he knew more about my history of America and the war and the people than I knew anything about what their country was about. And they had, their own language. I come from also a Spanish background. My father was from Panama, and my grandmother spoke Spanish, but family never taught it to us. They spoke both Spanish and Tagalog, Yeah. But it would have been nice to have been able to speak the language, get to know the people. We, instead of going into that town and using and abusing people, we could have been cleaning up a river that was just a sewer of a river. Or like you, helping with creating medical clinics, that would be available for people that were suffering and poor in their country. And I just thought of all the things, and that was all came to me after all this stuff, and saying, how is it that our military doesn't even start to train people from the very beginning? If you're going to be in another country, you must learn the language of those people. You must learn their history and their culture. You will meet and learn so much in this world.
We were, so I was with, at that time, there's been a designation change, I was with 141 Support Battalion, 41st Brigade here out of Oregon, and we were pretty fortunate because we knew 2 years in advance pretty much that's where we were going, and the mission was going to be, our mission was to train the Afghan National Army. They called it the ANA mission. And when we went to Camp Shelby, Mississippi to do our train up, we literally had to take a week of culture training, of Afghanistan culture training, which was really, really nice. And knowing that we were going there gave us soldiers a chance to, on our own time, if we so choose, to learn about it.
Right.
And I actually went back to the 60s and started going forward because it used to be an incredibly beautiful country. We used to get lots of cherries and pomegranates from there. And to go back and see it now, it's quite different after being invaded so many times and Russia pretty much destroying the whole countryside. But so it was really nice getting to know some of those people. And so when I came home, I felt pretty good. Didn't realize I had issues. For quite some time after. It was probably almost a year and a half. And I didn't even know about Returning Veterans Project. And started seeking help. And it took a while. We were talking about getting into the VA system.
Right.
It took a while. They ask certain questions. When you contact the VA, there's a list of questions that they have to ask you when you're looking for mental health. And I learned that there is a waiting list unless you are considering harming yourself or somebody else. And so there are little...
So if you answer yes to those...
If you answer yes, you get to see a mental health practitioner
go to the front of the
within
class.
72 hours. So yes, you are moved to the front of the line. And I did not know that after I'd been denied several times until a friend of mine said, you need to say yes. And so I called and they said, are you going to harm somebody? And I said, no. And they said, are you going to harm yourself? And I said, I might if you don't let me see somebody now.
Right.
So, so I did. Then couldn't get a job.
Yeah.
Couldn't get a job. 26 years in the military. I had a lot of logistics experience. and that was pretty disheartening. And I think that was part of my trigger also. So I was told that I couldn't get a job because I didn't have that piece of paper that said I had a degree. So I finally gave in and I went back to school. And decided after about a year, I decided, well, what I want to do is I want to do something back. I want to do something with veterans. This is what I went through after I got out.
Yeah.
I don't want to see other veterans go through
Good
this.
for you.
And so it took me a few years, but towards the end of my bachelor's program, when it was time to do my internship, I started contacting some organizations. I want to do my internship, and I've been working with veterans with education, employment, and in these different areas. This is my next step, and couldn't find anybody. I was talking with a friend, and she goes, "Hey, my friend says you need to contact this agency." And I said, "Returning Veterans Project." I said, "I've never heard of them before." She says, "Well, just call her." Okay. So I called Belle. Belle's going, "What?" I was like, "What does this person want?" I'm pretty sure she thought it was crazy.
No, I didn't. Oh, another vet.
So we met, and I had the distinct honor and pleasure of being able to do my internship with Returning Veterans Project, and really got to learn that, wow, not only is there Returning Veterans Project, but there are other organizations out there that have all these different things for veterans that it's not known, it's not public for whatever reason. We're not being told these organizations are out there to help us. And so, and at the time that I was seeking my internship, I was working for a company in Vancouver called Human Services Council, who at that time was administering the Clark County Veterans Assistance Fund grant. So it was kind of like my last piece of what I needed in order to fulfill my portfolio for my bachelor's degree, was doing outreach. And I have, with that, have ran into people that I have served with and have now got them connected with Returning Veterans Project, and have now been hired on as staff. I think the key thing is really getting the word out of all these different organizations that are out there for veterans that veterans don't know about. And I think in so many levels, it's getting that information to the Guardian so they can get that out to the soldiers. I think it's getting it out to organizations, Veterans for Peace, the VFW, the American Legion. This is available. I think getting that information out to employers, it's key for employers to have resources to send these veterans to when they're hired on and then triggers happen or something happen, to be able to keep them on as an employee, but to be able to give them resources. If you've got an issue or if they've had an injury that maybe their work is aggravating, then they can come back, they can go onto the Returning Veterans website and they can get a chiropractor if need be.
But first, we need more providers.
Oh, yes.
So if you
Definitely.
have people watching who are chiropractors, massage therapists, acupuncturists, naturopaths, mental health therapists, drug and alcohol counselors, couples counselors, work with kids, one free slot in your practice is all that we ask. You go through the applications on the website, go to the For Provider page at returningveterans.org. Fill out the application. You'll go through a 1-hour orientation, give lots of information on veterans in Oregon, returning veterans in Oregon, and families and what they need, and then, you know, start seeing a client. The body workers fill up faster than the mental health folks, as you probably, you know, when people come home from Iraq or Afghanistan, they don't think, I need to go to counseling, but a massage, chiropractic, I hurt, So
acupuncture?
Acupuncture, Acupuncture is really good for ramping down PTSD symptoms. There's also the Portland Veterans Acupuncture Project, which you probably know about. It's free. It's once a week for veterans of all eras.
Over at a little church there?
Yeah, it's in Southeast Portland. I can't remember the church, but if you Google Portland Veterans Acupuncture Project, you can find the address and the time. They're
I've been there
great.
once myself. My time is always the hardest part of getting.
I know,
services.
all of us.
But no, I think it's a terrific thing. So, as an outreach person here, what's your job going to be for them?
So, for the remainder of this year, my biggest goal, and what I've been directed by my executive director, is recruiting practitioners.
Okay, that's
recruiting practitioners, because so if you think about, Oregon is one of the smallest states in the United States, and we are only second to Louisiana as far as deployments.
Per capita.
Per capita. There's probably
For Guard and Reserve, yeah.
less than 200 soldiers that are active in the Guard that have not deployed, and there are many active.
And they just deployed recently.
They
didn't
just
They
well,
just-
they're
they're
in their train up.
training.
They're in their training process now. They're in Fort Hood, Texas, doing their train up, getting ready to do a year-long deployment in Afghanistan.
900, yeah.
Not just active guards, but active duty people that have now separated have come back. They're anticipating in the next few years that some 25,000 soldiers are going to come back to
right.
to
There's
Oregon.
already 31,000 current war vets in Oregon, so. Yeah.
So for a small state, that's so one practitioner to give up one free bono slot is really cool, but
Oh, yeah.
we only have 152 for 31,000 soldiers right now. And we're talking, those are
We
just...
know we can't serve everybody, but we try.
But we try, and so our goal is by the end of the year to bring on 70 new practitioners. So that's going to be my main focus for this year.
So, Bill, then also we're dealing with the, well, they call it Obamacare, and is that in any way going to help?
I think it
people
slowed
that-
down volunteer recruitment. What I've heard is that it's impacted therapists and other people and how they do their job and the paperwork they have to do. So a lot of people say, I'll consider it after I figure out what all of this means for me. So it's kind of slowed down recruitment a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's oftentimes when I think about, we just had the major recent scandals with the VA, what happened in Arizona and Texas, and I was online with a young woman from, she said 2 tours, and she apparently had cancer, and she was going to the VA and wasn't getting the help that she needed, and she was
Call your
scared.
senator.
Yeah, that's, but she, when I'm listening to her, this is just Facebook back and forth,
Yeah.
I get a feeling of, close to suicide, kind of. You start, all I could say is I'm here, anything you need to do, you can call me, you can talk to me, do whatever you need to do. But I also have friends in Texas, and we can always get people there. But the thing is I'm hearing these things coming back from people. They're so disturbed by the scandals that are going on, and yet when I think about the administration, the funding that goes to the VA is not enough to cover the cost of all these people. They put trillions of dollars in going to war.
They do not
and they
have
did
enough
nothing
providers.
in the back
No,
providing
no.
for people that are coming out.
No.
And because the thing is, I've gotten good treatment from the VA. Once I've got in.
Right.
And the people on the ground that are giving you the services are doing a great job here, at least I think here in Oregon.
The clinicians I know
Yeah.
at the VA are great. Yeah.
They've been doing great.
Yep.
And they wish they could do more.
Right.
And they can't because they're stifled by the money that is supposed to be going to the VA and helping out. So people out there, one thing is get your senators and congressmen and representatives to be out there, and to contact them and ask, let's fund that, let's fund the VA, let's make sure everybody's taken care of. The other thing I would say is that we also want, I would like to see that we had a single-payer, publicly funded healthcare system for everyone.
Wouldn't we? Yes.
And,
yes.
and then you would still need the Veterans Administration to handle combat veterans that are specialized in that. And I wanted to, we're coming to an end here. We got a couple of minutes, and I wanted to thank you both for coming
you.
here. And is there any last words that you would like to?
If you want to make a donation, we would love that. We're doing, the guy that founded Craigslist has a Veterans Charity Challenge the last 2 years online, and we're one of about 100 and some nationally veterans charities. We were in 4th place last time I looked. So you can go to our website. There's a button on the home page, make a donation of $10 or more, and it'll help us find providers, help pay for Casey's position. And also the Red Lion on the Columbia River is really generous. They are hosting 25 current war veterans and their families on the 4th of July. So if you can do fireworks, if you're a combat vet,
That's hard, isn't it?
that's hard for a lot. But if you can do it, there are still a few slots open. Contact the Returning Veterans Project and we'll get you connected. They'll have free food, activities for kids on the 4th of July, and you can watch the Vancouver fireworks show.
There's one point I think that we forgot to mention is that we also provide a lot of trainings throughout the year.
Yep.
Yes,
We've
I was
done a
gonna
lot
ask
of
that.
trainings, TBI, PTSD, suicide prevention trainings, and when providers join Returning Veterans Project and offer that one free pro bono, they can attend these trainings and get free CEUs, which can be very costly for them, which are credit units that they have to maintain in order to keep their
Continued
license.
credits,
so,
yeah.
Right.
So that's one way,
yeah.
you can get compensated.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Well,
was a
I'm glad
pleasure.
to have you there, and I want to thank Metro East Community Media for being able to host Veterans for Peace forum here, and to Kelly Labonte and Jim Lockhart, who are our producers of the program, and we've been doing this almost 8 years now.
Wow.
I believe,
Wow.
something like that, and.
That's great.
So I'm glad that we're able to have a voice out here for veterans and to talk about the various ways. Really enjoyed your story, Casey, and finding out there was people that are out there really caring about the people in Afghanistan and doing great work.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking care of our veterans
My
here
pleasure.
at home, and that
pleasure.
there's an alternative
My
out there
son
for
is
everyone.
one of them. Yeah, absolutely.